Hello, we're live. Yay. Hello, everyone. My name is Stacy Nell. I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas African American Affairs Commission, and we are here for our Monday Lunch and Learn series. I am thrilled today to be joined by my friend Lindsay Ford. She is here with the Voter Network, and we are talking specifically about the upcoming special elections. I have now learned that at noon in Topeka is when they test the sirens.
Oh, yeah.
So if you hear some, maybe we should go live at like 12:02 just to make sure that that doesn't come up. But a little bit about Lindsay. People love when I do this. I pulled your bio, Lindsay.
Oh, fun. Okay.
Lindsay is the Voter Engagement Director for the Voter Network. Before starting with the Voter Network, she worked for the mayor of Kansas City, Kansas, where she oversaw policy and project management. She has also held roles in corporate community relations and on a number of Kansas political campaigns at the local, statewide, and federal levels, including serving as Congressman Dennis Moore's campaign manager for his 2008 reelection bid. So that must have been a handful to do a congressional level campaign. But yes, so thank you, Lindsay, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Stacy.
My first question is always, what are you having for lunch?
Oh, good question. I did a ton of meal prep this weekend. It always feels like I have a lot of things to eat or nothing.
Yes.
I bet a lot of people feel like that. I have like a rice. I have some leftover rice, some leftover salmon.
Ooh, yeah. Rice and salmon. Yeah. I had like rice and chicken and broccoli. So it's just basic.
It's like I'm actually doing that like TikTok viral salmon thing. So I'm pretty on trend.
I'm scared of you.
You haven't seen it. It is delicious.
You'll have to, we'll talk about that afterward. Okay, so because we only got a half an hour and I've got questions. I've got questions and you've got to talk.
I'll stop talking about TikTok.
we'll pick it up. So you work with the Voter Network, which is a branch of Mainstream Coalition. And I've sort of read your bio, but I want to sort of back up and talk about how you became involved in civic engagement, civic involvement, politics, and then specifically voter engagement. So just a little bit about you. How did you get to this work?
Yeah. Well, like you read in my bio, which I didn't know you were going to do. I worked on political campaigns for a long time, most recently for the mayor of Kansas City, Kansas, 2 mayors ago, and worked both in the office and on the campaigns, the first one that we won and the second one that we lost. But there was, after that losing that second election, this was probably kind of obvious, or should have been obvious to me over time and my experience in that space. But looking at the numbers and turnout, I was really, it was very obvious that there were neighborhoods in Wyandotte County where people voted at a much higher rate than in other neighborhoods. So Black and brown neighborhoods turned out in that election at about 17%. And I saw some predominantly white neighborhoods that came out at 40% or 45% in that election. And it was kind of disheartening to see that clearly, again, like stuff I knew and had seen, but in the face of a loss like that, I was sort of flabbergasted. And also just feeling like maybe working on political campaigns wasn't the place to really affect change at the voter turnout level, or that maybe campaigns weren't engaging the least likely to vote in our communities and aren't necessarily the mechanism to do it. Okay. It's not their goal. I mean, or the goal of a political party, really. Their goal is to win an election. And so they and I on those campaigns spend what little time and resources we have speaking to people who already vote. So there's like a local election turnout for school board races and city council races is very low, often lower than 20% of registered voters vote in local elections. And we always talk to those same 20% over and over, which creates this sort of crappy loop where if you don't vote, then you don't hear from people in power. And so I moved into the nonprofit space because I kind of wanted to get away from that model and start working on a model where we're focusing year round on the people who are least likely to vote in our communities.
That is so key. And I know we'll talk about this more often, but I think it bears repeating that campaigns specifically target people who they know are going to vote.
Right.
Because that's the good use of the limited amount of funds. I've been a candidate, and the candidate's job is to raise money and talk to voters.
Yeah.
And if we're going to spend money in direct voter contact, it's a better use of money to spend it on people that we know are going to vote.
Right.
But then, like you say, it starts this cycle, because if there are 15 people I know I'm going to vote, I'm going to talk to those 15. If there are 85 people who have never shown up to vote, why would I talk to them?
Right.
And so it's the cycle of, well, we don't hear from them until it's presidential year. Right. But it's sort of a self-feeding cycle. And okay, that's the reason why I brought you on here. So talk to me about how you got involved with voter to voter. Talk to me about how voter to voter works, and how give us the breadth of it.
Well, to take a step back a little bit, the people who are least likely to vote or least engaged in our communities are not coming to political rallies. They're not going to websites for political candidates. They're probably not on Facebook or social media with a ton of friends who are engaged necessarily. And so we start with the kind of core premise that you need to reach voters where they are, where they live, work, and play, and ideally through the people who they already know and trust. And there is less trust these days, particularly in political institutions, but also in a lot of places that we used to look for political information, like newspapers, for example, or news outlets. People aren't trusting that content these days. And so one of our big goals outside of voter to voter, which I'll talk about in a little bit, is just empowering partners or people who are working directly in their communities to have the information they need and feel comfortable to talk about voting and civic engagement. And so if you're a health clinic in Wyandotte County, or you're a school teacher in Topeka, or you're a church in Wichita, and you think voting is important and like letting people know that there's an election coming up, we're trying to get materials to folks and information so we're not just like starting from scratch all the time, right? So you don't have to be an expert. You run a health clinic, like you don't have to be an expert on elections to get you shouldn't have to rebuild this stuff if you want to put like a Facebook graphic out or something. So we're trying to talk to partners who are reaching impacted communities that way. We also built this online tool and effort called Voter to Voter. And we've already talked about how candidates target people who vote, or talk to people who vote. And we know who votes because your voting history is public record, not who you vote for, just whether or not you vote, which if you didn't know that, can feel kind of creepy at first, but I've been around that for a long time. It's the same data all these candidates and campaigns are using. It's powerful data, and we wanted to put that information kind of at the fingertips of anybody who cared to increase voter turnout or maximize their impact in this space. And so we built this tool. It's free, called Voter to Voter, and you can see which of your friends or people in your personal network are regularly voting and who's not.
So I want to back up just 1 second, because you talked about partnering with organizations that already are out there, like if it's a clinic or whatever the clinic or whatever organization it might be.
Yeah.
I think it's worth noting specifically that the Voter Network is a nonpartisan work. And so it's really voter engagement. So if people are concerned that, oh, you're going to push a particular political view or a particular candidate, that's not the space that you're in. So
that's right. We don't endorse political parties or candidates or one or the other. We could, I think, in some cases get involved on an issue by issue basis, and we don't really, except that we've done a little bit of work in like voting rights and on voter suppression issues. But, even the act of voting has become a little politically hairy, which is really unfortunate. I feel like we need to take that back and make it okay to be just talking about voting as a duty and a right in the spaces where we live, work, and play.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I wanted to back up and just sort of throw that out there, but then now you're talking about developing the tool. So yeah.
Okay. So we got to the creepy part already, where you can see who in your personal network is voting and who's not. And I kind of joke about it being creepy, but again, wow. I think about the forces on whatever the opposite side of the line you're on are using this all the time. And they're using it to kind of micro target in communities and tailor their messages. And it may feel weird at first to know that info, but it's a really it's a tool that we need in our tool belts. And so I'll just put that out there. I had someone kind of backing, like pushing back on that, like providing that public info the other day, but it's already public info and it's in a lot of people's hands. It's just like not that accessible. It's like hard to get through. And so I believe strongly in making it accessible for people who want it. Okay, so we have teams of people who sign up for Voter to Voter. The teams are made up of volunteers. We call all of our volunteers ambassadors. We've got teams all around the state, and a team might be, it might just be like Stacy's book club has a team, right? And or it could be more like a tied to a more formally to an organization. Like we have a lot of League of Women Voters chapters that have teams, or we have a lot of churches that have teams. We have, all sorts of teams. But we're talking to voters now in 92 counties out of 105. And the idea is once you sign up, we're just going to give you, we give our volunteers like a weekly email the last 5 or 6 weeks of the election that has just like straight up logistics about how to vote and where to vote and the timelines and little scripts for sending text messages to your friends. Again, all nonpartisan scripts for putting something in an email newsletter. And then we send that out weekly so that you can find your friends and talk to them. But we also can see at the end of the project who voted and who didn't. And in the last 4 years we've done this, the voters that our volunteers have connected with have turned out at like a 20 or 25% higher turnout than statewide average. And it works particularly well with the least likely to vote among us.
Right. Yeah. So let's take Stacy's book club.
Yeah.
I have my book club. I've got my friends. They come over every other Saturday and we read trashy novels and talk about it.
Cool.
Over mimosas.
And
that's not true. I will totally invite you.
Thanks.
So what would that look like if I wanted to start a team? What information would I have access to, and how might I use that?
Sure. The website is votertovoter.org. It's a TO, not a number 2. We also have, our organization is called the Voter Network, and the effort is called Voter to Voter. So if you went to the Voter, that's kind of confusing, but the voternetwork.org will also get you to Voter to Voter. But there's, once you're on votertovoter.org, there's like a create a team button. You can also sign up if you don't want to create a team. We have like a catch-all team that's right on that page. You register for an account. You add your friends. It gives them a score. It's like a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And 4s are the most likely to vote, and 0s and 1s are the least likely. Let me add here that we at the Voter Network are in the no shame game. So I think voting is legitimately kind of tricky. I think finding information about candidates who are running at the local level is kind of hard to do.
Yeah.
And so I just want to acknowledge that here. But we also can see who is voting early, either by mail or in person. And so you'll be able to see that. We don't actually ever talk to any of the people you add. We don't ask for their contact information. We are not in the business of talking to voters, again, because we don't think we're the right people. We think you are the right person who has the most influence over your own personal network. And in fact, the research backs that up, that really people are much more likely to engage in a behavior if they hear from someone they know and trust. This is like, we're not in the business of changing hearts and minds. We're really in the business of changing behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like any social, like any behavioral science experiment, right? Like, I like to say as an example, like, I know I should compost. I even have a compost bin. I should turn my computer around and show you. I even have like a little compost bucket on my counter that I have never put anything in. Like, it's sitting there empty, It's been there like more than a year. And if I had a friend come over and kind of walk me through it, I'm a little intimidated. Like I know I could Google it, but I'm still sort of like, it's just a thing that I don't know. Like, am I supposed to get worms? Am I supposed to like put something in the backyard? Where do I dump it? Like, I can never remember what I'm not supposed to put in there. I think for voting, it can be kind of similar. Like if you haven't done it, it can be pretty intimidating. So just having someone walk you through it's really valuable. Okay, so you add your friends.
Yeah, I've got friend A, B, C, D, E,
Yeah.
and so if I put the names in the tools, and then I'll get a score. So I mean, I'm cheating because I kind of know how it works. So like friend A, it'll say that maybe their score is a 1, and friend B
Yeah.
is a 1, but friends C and D are like 4s,
Yeah.
and then I've got friend E who's like a 0. So
Yeah.
like what does that mean if I've got like this range of friends that are like 0s, 1s, 4s? How would I approach that?
Yeah. It's not super like super sophisticated modeling. It's just how many of the last 4 November elections someone has participated in. And actually, out of the 1.9 million voters registered in the state of Kansas, only 11% have voted in all 4. So
Wow.
it's a very small number of people who come out every time, which also means it's a very small number of people who are making really important decisions for us, which I'll point out. So if you're finding 4s, those people are kind of voting nerds or enthusiasts like you and me, and you should recruit them to be on your team. A full almost 20% of registered voters in the state of Kansas have not actually cast a ballot. So they get registered to vote. We're not even talking about unregistered voters, Stacey, and it's a hard number to like get an exact count for, but there are probably 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 eligible adults in Kansas is not registered to vote.
Wow.
But once they get registered, a full 20% have then not ever done it. Another almost 22% have gone once, which probably means they're voting in a presidential election and not any other time. And
I hear that a lot. People say, well, I registered when I got my driver's license and I just never voted.
Yeah.
So they're registered, but they're not voting.
Right. And so, yeah, again, it can be kind of tricky. And some people may tell you they vote, but they don't even know they're skipping local elections, right? Like we did move local elections just a couple of years ago from the spring to the fall. So now we vote every August and November in Kansas. And I think that's kind of helpful, but a lot of people are skipping those.
That's true. Yeah. So I'll get my list, my 5 people. I've got my 0s, my 1s, and my 4s. And so what you're saying is, how should I approach my friends who show up as 0s and 1s? And I should say, once I put the names in, person A, person B, person C, and then you send me information that, again, it's not how they voted. So it's not that, but just whether or not that person has voted in the last handful of elections.
Right.
And how would you suggest we approach our 1s and 2 friends?
Yeah, start with the 0s, 1s, and 2s. They're the ones who need a little extra handholding, and a social media post isn't going to cut it. I'm sorry, everyone. Your social media post isn't going to cut it.
Wait, are the yard signs going to fix everything?
Stacey, don't take me down this path. I mean, there's definitely a place. Well, let me back up. The things that we see used on political campaigns, yard signs, social media messaging, postcards even, they all have a place and a value, or else campaigns wouldn't be using them. They just tend to work better on people who are already engaged. And so if you are already planning to vote and you see your neighbors all have neighbors that you care about and trust all have the same yard sign, maybe that's going to influence you to like remember to go vote or vote one way or the other. But it does not, these tactics do not move people to behavior change. And so when tested in the field, say we postcard everybody in the neighborhood with a very specific, like, we got to increase turnout here message, we see increases of about 0.5%, 1% max. And so again, valuable, but just they're not going to like move someone who doesn't vote. So we say reach out to those 0s, 1s, and 2s one-on-one. however you normally communicate with them. So if Stacy, if you and I always like DM on Instagram, I'm gonna like DM you on Instagram and say, hey, voter registration deadline's tomorrow. I know you moved recently. There's this site where you can register to vote online. You can get it done in like 3 minutes. Can I help you? Like, why don't you run through it? And if you have any questions, holler at me or whatever. And so we do a lot of sample text messages like that, or that DM, or if you call someone if you always see them at your book club every other Saturday on whatever, talk to them at book club. Like, hey, while you're all sitting here, voting by mail is super easy in Kansas. Why don't we all just do it? And then we can like fill all our ballots together and turn them in, whatever. We like voting by mail. We push it a lot. I think it cuts the intimidation factor out, especially for new or people who aren't voting regularly.
And the benefits of voting by mail is that you have to apply to get a ballot by mail. In fact, I was door knocking just this past weekend, and a woman said, well, I got a ballot last time. Do I need to apply again? I'm like, yes, you need to apply every election to get a ballot by mail. And I happen to have the JOCO election website. And I said, you just go to the JOCO election website. You can fill it in online. Some of if someone's intimidated by voting by mail, the ballot will be sent to you ahead of time. So there's not that pressure of standing in line and feeling like there's someone, waiting in line, and you have to make the decisions on the screen and the technology. You could sit down in your home, open up the ballot, take the time to read things, right? There's a constitutional amendment ballot on the ballot coming up here in August. So if you want to get a chance to sort of sit down and read it carefully, if there's contested elections, that will give you time. You have the person's name. You can make sure you spell it right if you want to Google them real quick. So voting by mail definitely has its place. I honestly will tell you, walk that bad boy ballot back in. I'm hesitant to put it back in the mail. if I can say that publicly. I like the idea of getting the ballot and being able to take your time to fill it out. Please make sure you follow all the instructions, like signing the outside legibly, make sure you do it the right way. But there's definite benefits to being able to take your time to fill out a ballot.
Yeah. Yeah. In our effort, voter to voter, of the people in the last 4 years who have requested to vote by mail, 98% of them have turned it in.
And I should say the reason you know that is because you can track whether or not people have voted.
Right. We can. Let me mention a couple of websites, and they're all listed on the voternetwork.org. So if people are like, why are you giving me so many websites? We tried to aggregate them. I mean, if you're not in Johnson County, you can apply to vote by mail at KAAACvotes.org. The voter registration deadline is tomorrow, July 12, but you have until July 26 to request a mail-in ballot if you want to vote by mail. We will push out a ballot guide probably later today or first thing tomorrow. That also includes your polling locations and all your early voting sites that are available to you in your county. And early voting in person is really easy across the state. That website will be ksballot.org or ksboleta.org. It's very similar to the League's Vote 411 site, which is also great. The reason we built another one is because we can go a little bit further in a local election year. So actually we can cover a lot more communities next year. So in 2023, it's actually an even more valuable tool. Do you want to talk? Well, I'm not even going to ask you for this August 2 election that's coming up that Stacy already mentioned, with a constitutional amendment on the ballot related to reproductive health care. And actually the first vote in the country related to reproductive health care after the fall of Roe v. Wade. So very interesting election, kind of wild, but it's a tough election because it's an August one that not a lot of people typically participate in. So just a heads up, any registered voter in the state can vote on or before August 2, including people who are unaffiliated with a party or who identify as independents. And that's unusual for August elections. So Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliated, anyone can vote in that election.
Yeah, we have been hitting that point a lot. I have even on my, like, people have personally messaged me because that to me is the I'm going to say it, it's shenanigans that this important election is going on in August. I'm learning to call it a special election, not even call it a primary.
Yeah.
Because I've been personally contacted by friends of mine who are unaffiliated, because there's confusion as to whether or not people who are unaffiliated can vote in this election on August 2nd. Yes, you can.
Mm-hmm.
You do not have to be, you have to be registered to vote, and the deadline is tomorrow, which is also why I wanted Lindsay on to talk about this today. You do not have to declare. It's my understanding, at least in Johnson County, you don't even have to declare to get a ballot. You can get an unaffiliated ballot. We'll still have the constitutional question on it. And in Johnson County, we have an open primary for the chair of the county commission. But a person could be registered as a Republican. You will get a Republican ballot that has the constitutional question on it, and any of the contested primaries, of which there are many. A person can be a Democrat, and you will get a Democratic ballot, which will have the constitutional question on it. And then there's sporadic primaries around, which is why this may not be on a lot of Democrats' radar. If you're thinking, I don't live in an area where there's a primary that's contested, I don't normally vote in August. Please know that you can vote. And unaffiliateds who normally don't vote in primaries at all, it is open. It's fair game. Everyone can vote. Libertarians, you can vote.
Yeah.
So yes.
Oh, sorry, I left out the libertarians.
But thank you. But talk about. So you say that because you can track who actually votes, that the mail-in ballot return rate is in the 90%. So talk about, like, this idea that when you have the teams, you have the ambassadors, and then they follow up with their friends. Go ahead and talk about how your results have been really good.
Yeah, thanks. I feel like you tossed me a softball. My results have been good, and we will keep doing this as long as it works. And it can feel small, like almost too small for some volunteers. Like, you want me to just find 5 people or 10 people and make sure they go vote. But it's snowballing. And we're now talking to more than 30,000 voters in the state, and they're voting at least a 20% higher rate than state average. But it's again, like, an even bigger impact with those 0s and 1s than with the 3s and 4s, who don't need as much help. So we're gonna keep using it. And again, that's compared to turnout that we've seen tested in the field, where it's hard to get like a 2% increase with most tactics. It's this trusted messenger. It's that one-on-one engagement and follow-up, and just kind of helping someone like through a new behavior. And I'm sort of the mind, there might be people who disagree with me on this, but like, if my friends don't inherently know their personal reason for voting yet, I maybe don't start there. I maybe just start with the act of getting a ballot cast, and we kind of just run through the steps, and I make sure they have the tools to research their ballot or whatever. I sort of feel like once they've cast a ballot, often their interest level follows. But maybe not always the first time, but I've now been doing this several years with some friends who were not great voters 4 years ago, and have really come along, or sending me like selfie stickers on election day. And you do not have to tell people. They don't know they're in your list. So most of my volunteers, well, I don't know if most, a lot of my volunteers will not say anything about the fact that they know whether or not you vote, right? Like, they'll just say, hey, Stacy, I really care about what's going on in our state, and there's a big election in August too, and can I help you cast a ballot, or do you have any questions? I'm here for you. I, on the other hand, will normally say something like, hey, Stacy, I said I'd get 10 people out to vote, and you're one of my 10. So now you're kind of accountable to me, and not just the state of our politics as a whole. And if I really know you well, I'll say, Stacy, you didn't vote in the last election. I really need you to get out there this one. I don't do that with very many people, but maybe the girls in my book club.
In my book club, they'll be like, I'm tracking whether or not you're voting, and you still have 3 days left, and you have not made it to the polls yet. Can I give you a ride?
Most of the time, people will be like, you're not going to be like, you're talking to people you know, so you're probably not having like super hard political conversations with people.
True.
And most of them are just like grateful for the information. Like most people don't know there are nonpartisan ballot lookup guides out there, or places you can put in your address and see your polling location easily. And if you're only doing this stuff like once a year, potentially twice a year, it can be easy to lose those sites or like not know where that information is. And so most people will just be kind of grateful to have you there providing the info.
That's what I have found.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you. Thank you, Lindsay, for coming on. That half an hour went very quickly.
That was fun.
Yeah, but thank you for the information. So we have ended every show talking about the importance of voting. It is a big election coming up on August 2nd, and the registration to be able to, the deadline to be able to vote in the August 2nd election is tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay. You must be registered. You get yourself registered today or tomorrow in order to be able to vote in the August 2nd election. It will be different. You can register later and be able to vote in November. But right now, our focus is on August 2nd. Everything is sort of focused on getting people to turn out to that election. It's a very important question. I even got it cleared. I can't apparently weigh in on issues. I can't weigh in on candidates, but much like the fact that there are churches that have signs out front, I'm still going to try to remain nonpartisan here and just really impress. I say it all the time. You know, too many of my ancestors fought, bled, and died for my right to vote. And I'm going to vote in everything. I'm one of those 4 voters. I've pulled my voting record, and I've voted in like everything for the past 8 years. 10 years, and working on. So, thank you, Lindsay, for coming on. I will continue to post on that, and I think one thing I really have taken away from you is that when we talk to our friends about voting, they're more likely to vote. Just like if I recommend a restaurant down the street, the fact that I've recommended, hey, you should go try out this restaurant, will be more important to people than if they see a commercial on TV. So if you help your friends turn out to vote, that will actually go a long way to helping them vote.
That's right.
All right. Thank you so much, Lindsay. I will talk to you later. We can, I'll bring you into my book club.
Thanks, Lucy, for being in. Thanks for the work you're doing.
Have a great day. Bye.